elements. Now that's a really big word, but I know I've talked about story elements. And basically what elements are parts of the story. So what are the different parts we need? So let's look at the first one. In order to have a story, we have to have an author that writes it. So that's the first element, is we must have a writer who's going to write the story. So if we have the writer, what else do you think we might need for a story? So we have the writer. Libby? Yep, the writer is the author. We have the author, the writer.
I know what.
Raylan?
The illustrator.
You are right, the illustrator. And so, I'm going to skip that one. We need an illustrator. So the illustrator draws the pictures. Now, in some chapter books, do all chapter books have pictures? No. Not all of them. But like when Mrs. Murphy reads Ready, Freddy, this is a chapter book, but are there pictures in here?
Not much.
Not much, but there's some pictures in here. So, in paperback books and some chapter books, they have pictures. Or at least the cover. The illustrator might have to do the cover for sure. Okay? Ellie?
Did you make that?
I did, yes. I did. Now, we must have an author, an illustrator. We must have the title. And the title is the name of the book or sometimes the poem. So this person's reading Chicka Chicka Boom Boom. So you have to have a good title that is catchy, that your readers can be like, oh, I want to read that book. If Mrs. Murphy wrote a book that was called Cat, would you want to read it?
No.
No. What if I wrote a book about, and it was called, the title's called Pigs? Would you want to read that?
No.
What if I wrote a book that was called The Three Little Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf?
Yeah.
Yes. So you want a title that's very interesting, that'll catch your attention. You don't want a boring one. Because if you have a boring title, nobody's going to want to really pick that up and read it. Okay? Then you must have a setting. Where is the story taking place? So it could be at the beach, it could be at school, it could be out in space, it could be on a farm. Where is the story taking place? Where is it happening? Then, after this, you need to have the characters. The characters are the people or the animals in the story. So your characters just don't have to be people. They can be animals too. Okay? But usually you have one main character. Who is the story all about? And then you have some other characters that are part of the story too. Brooklyn.
When I was with my it's about this. Well, I was with my dad, and then my finger, and then the doctors were really nice. So we made up a really good story. It was on a farm, and they all got to pick their characters, and I was one of the workers. And then one of my favorite girl doctors was one of my helpers that took the horses too. She's a horse helper, and there's I think it was Harry the Hedgehog. One of my doctor all the way, my doctor all the way in my Colorado, my surgery doctor. He did it, and then there's I don't remember the other people whom there was, but I only remember them, and I remember some pigs. I think there's 3 pigs because people pick 3 pigs. My sister picked a pig, and then my dad picked a pig, and then Sako picked a pig, and then my sister picked a pig.
Okay, so you have pigs as your characters too. So you came up with your own story with your doctors and stuff?
Yeah, I wanted to live on a farm.
That's
and
really
then
cool.
they had to put this thing in.
Yeah.
Whatever it's called.
Okay, your ID in. Okay. Then, after you have your setting and your characters, you need to have the plot. And I know a few weeks ago we talked about the plot. have to have a beginning of your story, we have to have a middle, and we have to have an end. And in the middle of the story, who remembers what usually happens in the middle of the story? Just Addie and Brooklyn are the only two that remember. There's always something that happens. What happens in most stories? Addie?
If it's like the very little kids, kind of in the middle, it's actually stuff, but like in the middle, it's like the little pig. He built like a stick house.
Yep, and so what happens?
The wolf came over.
There's usually a what?
He built.
There's usually a problem. Like in the Three Little Pigs, he built a stick house. Was that a problem? It did not keep him safe, right, from the wolf. So usually in the middle of the story, there is a problem. And so this causes trouble for the characters. And so you always should have a problem in your story because it keeps it more interesting. If you don't have a problem, then it's too happy and too nice, and it's not fun to see how we're gonna solve it. So you're gonna always have your problem. Then towards the end, you're gonna come up with a solution and how is the problem solved. So Addie used the example of the Three Little Pigs because we talked about that a few weeks ago. So the first pig built his house out of sticks. No, hay, right? Hay. The second one built him out of sticks. The third one, bricks. Did that help solve the problem?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was part of it, right? Okay.
And why were the two guys like the one that said beginning, middle, and end? Can you go back to that page?
Sure. Yep.
Why are the two people in beginning and end the same?
Oh, they're just the same person.
Miss Murphy.
Kind of the same.
I thought you made it.
I did.
Miss Murphy. I didn't know you were an artist. If you click right at PS, you can get.
Yep. Okay. All right. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so usually when I think about it, this top is kind of the middle is the very top where the problem is, and then it starts to come down where it's called the climax. You'll learn that when you get into middle school, the climax of the story, and then it starts to come down. Okay, Ellie?
Sticks and bricks rhyme.
They certainly do, don't they? Okay, then after you solve the problem, guys, you have the solution, and then after the solution, usually that's like the ending of the story. Okay, now I want to show you this because we're not going to do this today, but next week, or if we don't get to next week, because next week's kind of a busy week with Halloween, I like to do some Halloween writing. We might not get to this next week. We will probably get to it the first week in November. And this is called a concept map. Does it look like a map to you? No.
Kind of.
Doesn't look like a map like we have in map skills, but this is a map for reading. Because when we want to create a story, we have to map it out. And you guys, can you see up here has title, then author, then illustrator. So those are the first things you need to figure out when you're making a story and you need to put it on your map. If you want to, you can, but you have to come down. Because we're in the middle of the story and we just went to the map here. Okay? Then, on your map, the next thing you're going to put on is your characters and your setting. You guys don't think you can be able to do this in a couple weeks? Put in characters and a setting?
Yeah.
And then, this is the fun part. After you have your characters and your setting, then you get to think of what's going to happen in your story at the beginning, what's going to happen in the middle with a problem, and then what's going to happen at the end with a solution. So that is how you create a story, is that you have to have all of these elements. If you're missing an element, let's say Mrs. Murphy has no characters. Do I have a story?
No.
No. Let's say I don't have a setting.
No.
Do I have a story?
No.
So you have to have all these elements to make up a story. So this is called a you guys say that? Concept map. Good. And we're going to put this in our journal. 1 week we're going to put it in our journal. Like I said, not next week, because next week it's probably going to be a Halloween writing, but the week after. Okay?